or ASQ. If that's something that sounds familiar to all of you, these are questionnaires that we of a state have adopted for our kindergarten readiness snapshot. So all elementary schools partner with families to complete the ASQ prior to kindergarten entry. But part of the reason why we selected this tool in Kansas is because it is a tool that can be used across a wide variety of settings. So it is something that is frequently used in pediatricians' offices for very young children, as young as 1 month old. With the idea being that when we think about kindergarten readiness, it's something that ideally should start long before, like that focus of making sure that children are have the supports that they need or are meeting developmental milestones, is something that can start really early, and that's something that families can be partnering with pediatricians, home visitors, preschool programs, child care providers to be able to support their development.
Just one follow-up question on that. You got it, but kindergarten readiness. And there are a lot of grandparents that have stepped in as parents. So what those skills were when their kids were entering are totally different. And I don't think that there's as much of an awareness of what skills they should possess to be ready to start kindergarten. I mean, there are some, they can count to 10, they can tie their shoe, they can, and all of those are great things, but not necessarily where your child should be. I mean, those things certainly are celebrated. Do we have something that, for the concerned parent, that shows them along the way that kind of progress, things that they should know at this point, at this point, at this point? And where is that available, if so?
Absolutely. So thank you to our technology friends for having these. So I think two things about that. One, I think that speaks to the importance of having some coherence and consistency across our Kansas early childhood system, because we want there to be some common understandings or some common tools, so that when families maybe have different family members who are talking to different providers or different experts in their community, there is some consistency in terms of understanding what's typical for development at a particular age and stage. And so our Kansas Early Learning Standards that all of you adopted this last February are that tool in Kansas at what we would expect children to know and be able to do at different ages and stages of development. And the reason why that's important is because that's something consistent that providers can look to that are well aligned with, say, national tools like the ASQ to be able to understand here's where a child is at. But if I'm a family, I may or may not know that those exist. In fact, I would guess that if we surveyed families in Kansas comprehensively, that many of them would not know about the Kansas Early Learning Standards. And so what we have tried to do through this early childhood systems building work is create some common tools that families can use. So for example, 1-800-CHILDREN is a phone number that anybody in the state can call to be able to access really great non-judgmental expert advice, to be able to help them think through, okay, I have a concern about this particular area of development. I'm not sure if this is something that my child should be doing or not at this age. And the experts who staff that line are able to help direct families to think about, here are how you can access developmental screenings in your community. Here are questions that you can be asking. Here are resources that you could review, and here are services that you can connect with, so that you can really meet somebody and develop a relationship and have that conversation about where your child's at. So this is the graphic that I wanted all of you to see, but it gives you that sense. I hope the anticipation was worth the wait, but it gives you that sense that we are trying to look at our early childhood system from a comprehensive perspective. And I think that this bullet point at the bottom, when we think about, okay, why do we even have a strategic plan for early childhood in Kansas? We must, as a state, collaborate effectively to make sure that children, families, and communities are well served. So that is our why for being here, and that's our pitch for why we would hope that those who have a stake in making sure that the first years of a child's life are successful in the state are interested in reviewing the plan. In terms of where we've been, I thought that a little bit of history might be helpful, starting with all of you, with the state board establishing the Kansans Can vision and really hearing from Kansans that kindergarten readiness is something that is essential to achieving that vision. And what we heard from Kansans is that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach that will suit every community, because our communities have different needs, because there are different types of services available. There will be different partners or different entities who are involved in supporting young children and their families. And so that's really our why for why we need to have collaboration. We need to make sure that we've got the flexibility for communities and for families to be able to access those services that they want. I was reflecting on my drive yesterday about where we've been, and when we had this vision, we were thinking, gosh, we really need a comprehensive plan for what this might look like. Made available at that time a funding source called the Preschool Development Grant Birth Through 5, which is funding that's been made available to states to be able to support the kinds of research and development of needs assessments and engagement and collaboration that goes into creating this kind of comprehensive strategic plan. And so the Kansas State Department of Education was awarded one of those grants in 2019, and we used that to complete our first comprehensive early childhood statewide needs assessment. In that, we engaged over 6,000 Kansans. We were very proud that that included Kansans from each and every county in the state. I've forgotten now how many, but it was very many community engagement sessions over that summer. And we also were able to take a very wide look at other program-specific needs assessments that had been developed so that we could really take a good stock of the information that we had available to us. And we used that to develop a strategic plan in response. And as we were developing that plan, it was an iterative process. We developed a first draft of the plan, and then we took it out for a series of 10 community roadshows to share, okay, here's what we've heard from you, here's what we gathered at a large convening that we had in October. Did we get this right? And we were able to hear from partners across the state about here's things that could be more clear, here's how we can really make this plan as useful and as useful as can be. And then in February or March of 2020, the State Board of Education and the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund adopted that All In for Kansas Kids strategic plan. And it was February because I remember sitting in our Children's Cabinet meeting and thinking, all right, now the real work begins, right? Now we're able to make sure that this is not a plan that just sits on the shelf. Some things happened in March of 2020 in terms of disruptions related to the pandemic, but we were very lucky to have this strategic plan because it meant that we had already done the hard work when we didn't have the crisis of the pandemic upon us, to be able to think about, okay, long-term, what are the pieces that we need in our state early childhood system? What are we missing? What can we use to move ourselves forward? What are some of those statewide pieces of infrastructure that we would really like to develop to make sure that no matter where you are in the state, you have some of these things that we think are really important and fundamental to making sure that you have a good local early childhood system. And so it was very helpful to have the strategic plan as we were considering what we might do, for instance, with federal COVID relief dollars. In 2020, the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund became the lead agency, stepped forward to take on the leadership role for this preschool development grant Birth Through 5 work. They are charged in state statute with doing some of this coordination and strategic planning across our state agencies, and so they were well positioned to step into that role. So in 2020, we as a state were awarded federal funding to implement some of the components of the strategic plans that we had developed. Along the way, we took time to not do the same kind of comprehensive needs assessment that we had done before, but to pause and do some updates to gather information about what was changing in our state or what areas of need might be. In 2022, we were again awarded additional federal funding to update the strategic plan and the needs assessment, and so in 2024 we've completed that work. We've completed a second, much more comprehensive needs assessment, which is available on the Children's Cabinet website, and we use that needs assessment to take the lessons that we've learned over the last 5 years and update our strategic plan for the next 5 years. And the Children's Cabinet adopted that updated strategic plan just a couple of weeks ago. When we're thinking about what we've done, and we touched on this a little bit during question and answer, I will say it is somewhat daunting to say, okay, what is everything that we've done in the last 5 years? And so the initial version of this PowerPoint was far too many slides and far too deeply in the weeds. These are some of the highlights, but if you are curious about learning more about any of these pieces or about other pieces of our statewide work, I'd be glad to share. But just a couple of pieces, and we've organized our new strategic plan into 3 areas, really focused on what we're calling our ecosystem, our state level supports that are available and our infrastructure that's available, the things that we're doing to support the workforce. We know that that is an area of need across many sectors, and early childhood is certainly no different. And then the experiences of children and families and the ways that they navigate our system and access services. But when we think about some of the things that we've accomplished, I'll say that one piece that I think we can be most proud of is just that when we think about the different actors who are involved in delivering services for young children and families, we are much more organized and much more coordinated now than we were several years ago in terms of different advisory groups or different contracted entities knowing who is doing what, making sure that when we are embarking on a new project, we know who we can consult with or who we might partner with to make that be something that's really effective, and really making sure that our system is much more transparent. We have experimented with different mechanisms for engagement and for communication, but as part of this work, if people are interested in following along with what's happening in early childhood in Kansas, anybody can go to the Kansas Children's Trust Fund website, kschildrenscabinet.org, and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up for weekly email updates. Those have been a useful way to keep people in the loop. We're also hosting monthly webinars, and we've also just gotten our governance a little bit more in order. I meet with my counterparts at those other state agencies that I mentioned every other Wednesday, where we're able to coordinate on this work and be able to talk about how we can move it forward. And we also have established a monthly advisory group that's made up of a broad cross-section of partners across the Kansas early childhood system called our Kansas Early Childhood Recommendations Panel that can be available to advise on different projects. So, for example, when we were working on the Kansas Early Learning Standards, we were pulling together a group of experts to work on that project, but we also already had an established mechanism to share with people who had said, yes, I'd like to help provide advice to the state and help steer our course in the area of early childhood, and we were able to periodically bring the standards to that group to be able to get guidance on our work moving forward. And when we're thinking about important accomplishments, certainly updating the Kansas Early Learning Standards was a multi-year effort. That is something that, as I said, is very important to creating coherence across our Kansas early childhood system, and making sure that we've got some consistent expectations for what typical development would look like as children age, recognizing that these are a guide and not a, by this date, a child must be doing X, which we talked about extensively as we were adopting those. We also, between our agencies, have established the Kansas Early Childhood Data Trust, which is a framework for how we can use data that might be collected between agencies and make sure that we are protecting confidentiality and protecting privacy, but also considering how we can use that information in a collaborative way to be able to gain insights that we couldn't from any one data source. So, for example, answering the perennial question of how many children are served by, say, preschool in the state of Kansas, that would be a really helpful question to have an easy answer to. But because if we think back to the graphic of the different players who are in the system, because there are different sectors involved, it is a little bit difficult for us to be able to answer that question because there's no one single data source that tells us that. And that then creates challenges if we're trying to understand, okay, we have limited funding available, where can we target this funding in the state to have the greatest impact, where's the greatest need? Being able to have additional data and having the ability to work together between agencies is really important to being able to answer that question. I talked about the importance of increased workforce supports, and some of these accomplishments that are highlighted here are core competencies for early childhood care and education professionals are really what we would expect our early childhood professionals to know and be able to do. And so this is work that focuses most closely on our child care and early childhood workforce, and that's been an important piece of work over the last several years. We've developed the Kansas Early Childhood Career Pathway, which is an important piece of infrastructure to help show the progression that an individual might take in their early childhood profession. And we've also, I'm very excited, are soon going to be launching a Career and Professional Empowerment, or CAPE, portal. This is going to move us as a state from currently, when we think about our child care professionals and the continuing education that they're required to participate in, all of those certificates and all of that accomplishment lives in paper files in their organization, and that makes it somewhat difficult for us as a state to have a good snapshot of really what our Kansas early childhood workforce looks like. We don't have a licensing system for child care professionals in the way that we do for our teaching professionals in the pre-K through 12 system. And so this CAPE portal is going to be a really important piece that can help us do things like understand who is providing services in our early childhood system and the credentials that they have. And then we've talked about some of these pieces in terms of improved navigation and services for families already. 1-800-CHILDREN is a very important resource. It's been around for a long time in Kansas, but we've been able to really beef up the functionality and the comprehensiveness of that resource so that anybody can go to 1-800-CHILDREN-KS.org to see a comprehensive resource directory filtered by zip code, available in multiple languages, and anybody can call 1-800-CHILDREN to be connected with live support powered by the Kansas Children's Service League to be able to get help navigating the system if they're not sure where to start, or navigating the services that might be available to them. That's a really important piece when you're out and about. We're working to promote that and to help people understand and know that that's a resource that's available. And then we also talked about our expanded statewide system for the ASQ, Ages and Stages questionnaires. We've worked to make sure that everybody, not just our pre-K through 12 schools, are able to access our online ASQ infrastructure, so that individual programs are able, like a child care provider, a health department, a health office, are able to use that online resource and be able to partner with families for them to complete the ASQ questionnaires without the cost of the ongoing online subscription being a barrier. Because as we were surveying the state, we learned that sometimes was getting in the way of providers being able to be able to partner with families to complete developmental screenings. So that was not everything that we've done in the last 5 years, but those were some of the highlights. When we think about the All In for Kansas Kids strategic plan, it is going to be available on the Children's Cabinet website by the end of the day on Friday. So it's not there yet, but I understand that you all have received it via email already. And it is, as I've said, something where we had extensive rounds of feedback, where we were able to take into account the listening sessions that we did last year as part of the Early Childhood Transition Task Force and other public engagement opportunities to make sure that as we were developing this plan, there was a version that was available online for people to be able to share feedback. And we engaged in lots of different conversation with individual groups to be able to make sure that their feedback was represented well in the plan. This is a summary of the strategic plan. I won't go through it in great detail in the interest of time, but it begins with our commitment to ensuring that that we will move it forward. It includes a really helpful background that lays out some of the research on the importance of early childhood, and it features and helps make some connections between our needs assessment findings and then the actions that we've proposed. And the plan is divided, as I said, into 3 pillars that look at the ecosystem of our early childhood system, our workforce, the professionals who support children and their families, and then the experiences and services for children and families. That's shown in more detail here. And I'll be quiet for a minute so you can look at that. I'll hide that for a second. There we go. And I'll keep going. And then the question really is, okay, how do we create, we've got this lovely plan, we've got all of these actions and this work that we intend to move forward, but how do we intend to put it into practice? How do we make sure that this is not something that is just going to sit on a shelf and gather dust in Topeka? And so we've laid out in the plan some multiple avenues for actually putting this into action. One important piece is recognizing that this can give some framework for local action. So as local communities are considering what they might do, as we are visiting with leaders in communities, as they're trying to say, okay, we want to enhance our ways that we support young children and their families, but we're not sure where to start. We have a lot of local energy across the state right now when it comes to groups who are working together to try to address early childhood needs in their community, either pressing and urgent needs like childcare or trying to look more generally at the supports that and the services that might be available. And so we lay out the ways that our local communities can use this strategic plan when they are, say, making the case to potential funders to be able to support work in their communities. They can show, okay, here is the research and here is a framework for how we might be able to move this forward. We also have state level opportunities. I've listed some of the advisory groups and the different working groups that we have across our state right now. And having this common framework of a plan is very helpful when our individual state agencies are making decisions about how to, say, invest limited resources or direct our work. So we have this available, and we expect that it can help serve as a guide for some of the partners who we work with across the state as we are moving forward. We also certainly want to make sure that we are maximizing the funding that we have and recognizing that sometimes we can be very efficient in terms of how we leverage multiple sources of funding, and sometimes additional funds are needed in order to truly expand services. And so we lay out the importance of how we can take the best advantage that we can of resources moving forward. And then we also lay out our plan for how we are going to engage across state agencies and regularly check in, share information, and make sure that we are progressing over the course of 5 years for this plan. So as I shared, anybody can visit kschildrenscabinet.org. On Friday, they can read the All In for Kansas Kids updated strategic plan, but they can sign up to join monthly webinars or sign up for weekly email updates, and we certainly hope they'll do so. I'm pretty close to being on time, and I think that we've got about 10 minutes for questions, so I'd be glad to share more information or answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. We have questions from Jim.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the report. This is a report that when I came on the board 12 years ago could never have happened. So thank you for your leadership, and for Randy, for you putting the effort that we need as a department to enhance early childhood education, because we know that bedrock is the foundation for our future success. So, I remember back when my wife and I moved to Wichita back in the early 80s, she started a daycare, which morphed into a preschool, and there weren't many options for parents. And the only parents that really had options were the parents who had resources, or in certain communities where there were no resources. And as an educator, education organization, we know how important that is. So we've come a long way since 30 years ago to what we have today. And you're balancing, and you've done a marvelous job of that, of balancing how intrusive can we be as a state in terms of taking kids out of their house and putting them in schools, supposedly, to offering opportunities to help parents navigate the systems, but also provide the supports that they need. Because I don't know about you, but even though I was a principal when I had my first child, I had no idea what to do with that rascal. So it really is important that we're doing this work to help parents be better parents, through our efforts, and giving them resources that we can step in and help them when they want that assistance. So thank you for what you've done in your presentation. I support what you're doing 100%, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Betty.
Okay, thank you again for this, but I have a quick question, and I need to preface that so you'll see where I'm going with it. A lot of study and information went into coming up with the statement that if a child does not know how to read by third grade, these are, and there were some projections that were associated with that. That really became a talking point to, and so a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of families have bought into that, and they feel like, okay, third grade is kind of that benchmark. I need to know, where my child is. Now, with that as the analogy, and we talk about from birth to kindergarten, has there been any kind of study where that is now a talking point where people are focusing in on, we can eliminate X amount of intervention, we can, if we start at this point and go through here? And I'm particularly interested with those kids, those babies that are in at-risk situations where they may not be prepared for kindergarten. Are there studies that actually show this, where we're out there saying this, and then this really becomes a buy-in point, like reading in the third grade?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes, so we do have really excellent research that indicates the effectiveness of being able to provide quality early childhood services to families. And I would really recommend the very beginning of the strategic plan as a good summary if you're ever looking for some of those talking points, to be able to understand that when families are able to access quality services, children are more likely to be successful in school and later on in life. We have really excellent research in Kansas that when families have access to supports like childcare or preschool or home visiting, then children are less likely to come into contact with the child welfare system or later the criminal justice system. So there's a real opportunity to prevent negative outcomes later on. And we also have great research that indicates the importance of these programs on children's healthy development. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is that there's more information at the beginning of the strategic plan, and the much longer answer is that if you read that and you're still not satisfied, I've got an email that I would love to send you that has some of my favorite studies on this. So absolutely.
Dina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering when you, and perhaps I missed you saying so, but when you're talking about monthly webinars and email updates, et cetera, are those targeted more to practitioners rather than to parents?
Yes. So when we think about some of those communications mechanisms, I'd say that they're targeted towards people who are working in early childhood in Kansas. So administrators of programs, local leaders who are working on these issues, or the individuals who would be sharing information with parents. When we're thinking about some of the things that we've done to increase parent knowledge, in addition to some of the pieces that we've talked about already, we've begun a series of fireside chats is what we're calling them, but they're Zoom opportunities that are put together by our family leadership team. It's a combination of families and individuals who are working on making sure our system is more responsive to families across our state. Those have been well received. We have an upcoming parent leadership conference that'll be here in Topeka in September. That's a great opportunity to share information with families. So we do have some great opportunities to share information in our system, both at the state and local level. But I would say that we certainly do have families who subscribe to the newsletter or who join the webinars, but the content is more closely tailored to professionals.
I guess from my point of view, I think we may be missing a group of people who don't necessarily make use of practitioner and that, however, they're interested in knowing more. And so having that opportunity for them to be made more knowledgeable as well is, I think, a valuable thing to possibly consider.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other questions, but I need to say that your ability to adjust in the absence of the problems at the beginning is impressive, and I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate that. Did you have something? Oh, Melanie has a question.
Actually, it's Ann's.
Ann has a question. Somebody talk.
Okay, well, I got my little hand wavy thingy up there. And Amanda, thank you for a great report. And I know I went to some of the summer sessions that we had way back when we started, talking to parents about this. And we came up with a great plan then. The plan gets updated every year. I know everybody who works on this is invested and cares about it. But at what point do we see the needle move? Who's making the measurements? And what do we expect in terms of actually making a difference with all this work?
That's a big question. We've attempted to show some of that through our needs assessments to be able to demonstrate places where we've made a difference. The pandemic certainly has been a challenge when we think about the timeline of this work. But I would say that one real lesson that we learned from the first iteration of the strategic plan in 2020 is the need for some more aligned and some more easy to consume metrics that track the success of the plan. So we are planning to share those and to develop those. I'd be glad to keep you all up to date on ways that we can more easily communicate that information, because it's certainly not a question of a shortage of data or information that's collected. It's a way to take this very comprehensive plan and be able to show metrics and progress in a way that is easier to track, that can accompany the slide that I shared of important accomplishments to date. Does that answer your question, Ann?
Well, kind of. I just, it's a lot of words, and we need to start showing people we're making a difference.
One piece that we have been able to show and share, when I talked about the early childhood data trust, we've been able to pair data from participation in early childhood services offered by the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund to data collected by the Department for Children and Families to show that when we provide early childhood services in Kansas, there is actually a significant reduction in the likelihood that children will later come into contact with the child welfare system. So those are the kinds of projects that we are trying to undertake to be able to help research, okay, when we do these things, does it make a difference later on?
Right. Well, I know we've got the right people in place. You guys do a great job with this. Now we need to really pull it together and show folks we're making a difference with what you guys are doing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I need to ask Catherine a question. What have you done that you have to put up with us 3 times in 2 days?
I have the third pillar of my little corner. So I will bring my speakers up here, and I promise I'll be shorter today. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for letting me come back before you today. I have for you the preparation standards that the higher ed programs use specifically for world language today. Just as a reminder, the program reviews you looked at yesterday all use preparation standards to identify what the teacher candidate or the educator candidate for any license area needs to know and be able to do by the time they finish that preparation program. So these standards are used by the colleges and universities to define each program they offer, and then to monitor those programs and make sure that educator candidates come out of those programs fully prepared for the needs of the classroom and the P-12 students in those classrooms. There are two general types of preparation standards. The professional education standards address teaching theory and methods and skills for any license area. How does one deal with third graders, 11th graders, and how to prepare lessons and assess and all of that. You've already reviewed those, so those are in operation, and then each license area has separate standards for that license area. So today I have for you leaders from the World Languages Pre-K-12 revision group who met to revise the preparation standards for world language teachers. So this is covering French and German and Japanese, and we hope now American Sign Language. This would be different from the Teachers of the Deaf standards that you reviewed in 2021, which works specifically with students who are deaf or hard of hearing and teaches all contents in ASL and any other communication systems that folks use. But this is to teach ASL as a world language. So I have for you Carrie Haberer, Luann Barron, and Dr. Petra Horn-Marsh.
Hi, good morning. I'm Carrie Haber. I'm the World Language Department Chair at USD 260 in Derby. I also have frequently throughout my teaching career worked with higher ed program reviews. So with our world language teacher standards or teacher prep standards, I just want to talk very generally about, what our tasks were on the committee. And then Petra and Luann will talk more specifically about how we included ASL. So there are 8 standards, you can see on the screen. The first 3 deal kind of with the knowledge of the teacher candidate. Proficiency, of course, is standard number 1, which is a big one. And then, how does the teacher candidate interact with culture and learners and things like that? And also, does the teacher candidate have a firm background in second language acquisition theory? Then 4 through 8 are more the pedagogy. So how does a lesson get prepared? What are the factors that go into teaching language to, in our cases, usually beginners, like students who have absolutely no language except for English, or perhaps they are a Spanish speaker, who's also an English speaker, of course, who's deciding to learn a third or a fourth language. So we take students from 0 to something. With the standards, of course, proficiency is the big one, so standard number 1. And one of the things that we looked at on the committee, because we do use ACTFL in the state of Kansas, as does most of the nation, for our proficiency standards, and that's the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, and they are the ones who research and study and publish standards throughout the nation for us to look at, and we also align to those. So we looked through our standards to make sure that our language was consistent, that it was inclusive, so any language, which of course is another task of ACTFL, is to make sure that their standards are inclusive, and just to make sure that our language was consistent. We did a lot of sort of reducing language in the standards to, I think, make it easier for higher ed programs to target what they do in their teacher candidate preparation. So I will let Petra and Luann take over. They have more specifics to discuss about our tasks.
Good morning to board members. It's lovely to see you again. This morning, I will be discussing the specific adjustments that we have made to the world language standards. And these also do include the careful inclusion of ASL terminology. and ASL meaning American Sign Language. I am so grateful for the Department of Education's consideration to be able to put together this task force to consider ASL as a world language. We have such a high number of students currently who are taking ASL, as will be explained a little bit more later. As we have carefully reviewed these standards to ensure that they accurately do reflect the linguistic and the cultural nuances of ASL. And by doing so, we are aligning ASL with the other languages in the standards and ensuring that our standards are both comprehensive and inclusive. So for example, native speakers and signers. When we say native speakers, it traditionally is an oral language, but now we have also added signers, native signers. Finger reading. It's similar to finger spelling, however, it is the recipient who is observing and taking in the finger spelling, which becomes finger reading. The word oral, we have added signed. So for clarification, history and education, you know, like when you see the term oral, ASL is not a spoken language. So it is a signed language. So we added that visual component. And so with the asterisk here, we're trying to clarify any language that has any kind of a written form, making note that ASL does not have a written form. So we are calling that signed published. So, and that anything published would mean a video-based publishing. So, and not a written published. So we have also added a glossary of those definitions on page 8. ASL uses a broad range of finger spelling, finger reading, things like that. So I believe that that glossary will help clarify anything. ASL, American Sign Language, does share several key features with other world languages, truly making it a legitimate part of world language standards. These commonalities include a structured linguistic system with its own grammar and vocabulary and the ability to facilitate expressive and receptive communication and a deep connection to cultural identity. And other world languages follow suit. You know, ASL is very similar to other world languages. And again, the support of ASL being a world language. I will also turn this over to Dr. Petra Horn-Marsh to explain a little bit more about the statistics of acquisition of ASL. Good morning, one and all. Good morning, nice to see some of you again. I would like to explain just a few things, but 3 things I'd like to speak with this morning. As mentioned with some of the statistics, we do have, and these are rough estimates, statistics all over the U.S. ASL classes typically were on a university and college level have grown roughly 400%. So the interest and the demand is absolutely huge. And with that high demand being at the post-secondary level, that has influenced the K through 12 arena. So high school, we have ASL classes all over the U.S. that are being offered. So here in Kansas is just the same. In Kansas, we have had instructors who are trying to teach and be trained and are not so qualified. So whoever can sign has kind of a warm body been put in these classes to teach these ASL classes. And so we want people who, teacher candidates who are qualified to teach and be able to come into the high school arena and teach levels 1 through 3. And often at the conclusion of those screenings, their level is only at ASL 1. So that means these students also have to pay again for a retake of these classes because their skill proficiency has not achieved the goals that were set before them. So we see this at KU. My program offers ASL 5 and 6, which is an advanced level. for linguistics. And so to move on to a career, but many students are not proficiently ready in ASL. So we refer them back to a community college or some other college ASL program that offers levels 1, 2, and 3. So we're seeing that need and raising the bar for higher standards and more clarified standards. So when students do enter the college arena, they can take ASL 3, 4, 5, and 6 and don't have to go back with those remedial classes to support their foundation. So again, this is very excited about this in the state of Kansas and considering these standards for teacher prep program for hearing teachers who want to teach ASL and also as a second or a third language as well. Plus, we do have hearing children who are ASL heritage language signers whose parents were deaf or who have an extended family member, an aunt and uncle or grandparents who then enter high school and say, oh, great, they have an ASL class as a foreign language. But then once they get into the class, they are very frustrated and they see a lot of these disconnects from their heritage language that they've used as a family to what's in the classroom. So our goal is to really target and make sure that these teachers who are teaching the language are qualified. And so just in closing, I'd like to show, my shirt. I'm not here representing Gallaudet University, but I am an alumni of Gallaudet. I did want to show you, there's a gold logo above the name of the college. And so it really is the sign we're representing in a logo, the sign of Gallaudet University. And so as you see the logo, it's kind of a swipe, a gold swipe. So an ASL and English and any other world language should be treated as such and on par. So thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, will we see these as action items soon?
Next month.
Okay.
Do you
Any
have
other,
any questions?
any other questions? Michelle?
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Porter. I know that you've been working on this a long time. We've been working on this a long time, because I remember committee meetings or advisory committees where we've been talking about the standards. So did we create our own standards in Kansas on that, or did we accumulate, so they came from another state then, and then we're expanding on that?
No, the world language standards were written in Kansas.
Right.
And then this group has expanded those and updated them for world language. The Teachers of the Deaf standards that you may be thinking of from 2021, those were, similarly, we had an old copy, an old version, but a completely in-state committee, which I think we have many members of here today also, revised those completely in-state.
Yes, okay, great. That's great, because I know that they were working on how are we going to test for that? Like, for teachers coming in or people coming in from other states, what does that look like for Kansas as far as being up to par, up to our standard that we want to create here in Kansas? So, great, thank you.
Melanie?
Thank you, Jim. I will be brief. I just wanted to thank our guests for coming today, and thank you, Catherine, for bringing this. I have heard an awful lot of feedback over the years about how inaccessible these programs are. I've heard a lot of students say, I really want to take an ASL class. The best I can come by is a club. And you talked about, sometimes you just get the warm body. Often that warm body is a fellow student, and they're meeting after school, and that's the closest they can come to learning ASL. So I am really excited to see this happening, and I just want to say thank you very much.
Betty?
In 3 words, I love it.
We look,
Well, and this is Luann, if I could say, this is the sign for I love it. So if you want to do this, this means I love it. It's like you're kissing the back of your fist.
Randy?
So, Michelle, I'll even go a little further. Seated just right there for most of his career, John Bacon, and then that lady, Janet Wall, said, we should be doing this a long time ago, 2 of the longest serving state board members. And so I know they're proud too of this moment, that finally we're bringing standards for ASL as a world language. So thank you to everyone for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you very
And thank
much.
you for your support. Thank you so much.
And we look forward to taking action next month.
Wonderful.
And this is applause. This is clapping in ASO.
Yes. Fantastic.
We will take a 10-minute break. Are you through?
I have 30 seconds, which hopefully will include more applause. This committee, as well as many others that do the work of writing standards, of reviewing accreditations that you saw yesterday and program reviews that saw yesterday, rely on the expertise of folks from the K-12 classroom, K-12 administrators, higher ed faculty, higher ed administrators. And I wanted to tell you how many there were last academic year, which was 233 separate people, including these three, who are working on or have finished 6 different sets of these licensure standards, 5 accreditation visits, and 83 separate program reviews for 10 separate institutions. Super quick, super quick. A through C, C through F, G through K, K through M through R through W, and W through Z. And this work couldn't happen without all of them.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Thank you again. We look
All
forward
right.
to taking
Very
action next
much.
month. And we will take a 10-minute break or until everybody gets back, whichever is first. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chair and Madam Chair online, thank you to the members of the State Board, to Dr. Watson. We really appreciate this opportunity. I've got good news for you. You're not going to have to hear much from me. So I've got two guests with me, and I'll introduce them, and they're going to walk you through a good process that they use around instructional materials and resources. And I just want to kind of frame the conversation a little bit with information that you know, just as some background, things that we've been talking about at the State Department and with the State Board for quite some time. So you'll recognize this statement. This has been a big part of our work around school improvement and accreditation as we've built our new model. It's a belief statement. It's really the why behind the work. We refer to it often as a theory of action. This is what we believe we can do and support across the state of Kansas. We've attached ourselves to some vocabulary. Heard Amanda Peterson use the term coherence often. We really like that term, building coherence and focusing on a few high leverage fundamental actions. And we believe if we can do that well, our kids will know more, be able to do more. And you've seen this model presented often. It's our school improvement model, and you'll find some references to high-quality instructional materials throughout this model. And it's an area that I think for the first time, the State Department, the State Board has said, we can support this work across the state. It looks a certain way, and it's just fundamentally a part of that theory of action, that belief that we have. So with me today are two outstanding educators. You may recognize them because they're both members of our K-TOY team, and what they're going to do is walk you through just a process that's used in Topeka 501 related to resource adoption, implementation, and so you can see that firsthand and don't have to listen to me talk to you about it hypothetically, but what it actually looks like. So we have Diane Kimsey and Sheriel De La Cruz with us today, and I'm going to invite them up and I'm going to adjust this for you and let them share their process.
You don't think you don't need it that high?
You can. It's up to you.
All right, I am Diane Kimsey, and it's nice to be back and to see so many of you that I've recognized from before, and hello to Ann online. I am the Topeka 501 elementary math consulting teacher.
And good morning. My name is Cheryl De La Cruz, and I am the 612, so secondary math consulting teacher. And I also teach high school and CEP math courses at College Prep Academy over at TCALC. So we thank you for this opportunity to present to you our district's resource adoption process. This process is crucial in ensuring that our students have access to high quality materials that are aligned to our educational goals. And so we're going to walk you through the process, and we're going to show you a visual, actually just the key components of the process or the steps involved in the process. So we start with setting parameters and guidelines, and that is basically aligning our adoption with, so one of it is aligning our adoption with the standards adoption cycle, the state's standards adoption cycle, which is usually 7 years. And so we make it a point that within the first 2 years of the standards adoption cycle, we also adopt resources, new resources that are aligned with the new standards. Within that timeline, we create detailed timeline within the year-long adoption process. So this is where when we are going and how we are going to do things, which is part of the things that you are going to see within this cycle or this process. And lastly, one of the parameters that we highly consider is our budget constraints. We can't do all of this without funding and without, I should say, appropriate and sufficient budget. So that's parameters and guidelines. And once we have established all that, we then move on to
The formation of the selection committee. Before I do that, I just want to point out, I also teach at TCALC, the Topeka Center for Advanced Learning and Careers, and I teach the high school students who think they want to become teachers. And so that's where I met you all last spring. I brought over a couple students. All right, so the formation of selection committee. This is where we bring in the entire stakeholders. So Sherry Ell and I, we oversee a team of teachers who represent every single grade level. Those teachers are invited to be part of this, and of course our assistant superintendent, she oversees us overseeing all of this. And so that's a group of teachers that are going to help with the selection. We also are going to turn to some of the paraprofessionals in the district and have them help us as well. We're going to turn to, we have a DCAC committee, that's District Citizens Advisory Committee. We'll turn to them. Is there someone who has a strong interest in math and wants to see how it is that we're going to go about choosing our new curriculum, our new resources, our new materials? We will turn to school administrators and see which school administrators would like to be in on our committee, principals, assistant principals, and such. We're going to turn to parents, PTOs, and see, is there a parent who has a strong need to, not a need, but a strong, who wants to provide input in this area. Of course, we look at special education, and we need input from special education. We need input from our English language teachers as well. So those are all part of forming this selection committee. You have the beeper?
Yes.
Okay.
And so once we have formed our selection committee, we want to build capacity within the selection committee, right? And so we provide several professional learning opportunities for them. But before we even do that, we revisit our goals. The purpose of the committee, we look at our philosophy statement. Each content area has their own belief and philosophy statement. So we make sure that we use that to guide the selection process. And then we provide professional development around the new set of standards, because we have to be knowledgeable about the standards, and that is both content and practice standards. And lastly, we looked at high quality instruction. So what can we do to provide the selection committee? Now, this is a continuous process. It's not like that's the first time that our selection committee has been trained about effective teaching strategies, but it's more of like focused on selecting instructional resources. So that includes high quality instruction and effective teaching strategies. So there's tons of professional learning opportunities for the selection committee to enhance and guide them in the selection process.
Step 4. Okay, I'll read it to you. It says review and revision of the resource evaluation tool. And so this is, we have a rubric that we have been using for years and years and years, and we have to revise it year after year after year. We have to meet the needs of the current students, not the students from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, us more than 20 years ago. I won't say, but anyway, we need to be looking at our current students and the students that are coming and make sure that we are meeting their needs. And so that's all part of the reviewing the rubric. Is it meeting the current students, the future students? How do we need to revise it? What changes should be made? And then we need to train all the players, all of our members of our selection committee, train them on what to look for then when we are using this tool. And then what is the numerical values? What does each numerical value in the rubric, what does it mean? What does it represent?
And once we have that set, we then start. So that's the curriculum leaders led by our teaching and learning leader and our assistant superintendent, Mrs. Billy Wallace. We then research what other districts use. So we then look at, we also get feedback and suggestions from the team or from the committee, but we research resource options. Did I put, no,
There you go.
that's why I'm like, what, where is it? Okay, so there it is. So we research resource options from several resources, from several sources. So one is we looked at what highly or high performing districts use. We also looked at materials that are being used by districts of similar demographics. And then we also look at ed reports and vetting sites recommendations. And of course, we don't want to miss the Kansas or KSDE's evidence-based practices and resources. So we also looked at that. And once we have that list, we then start with the next one.
So this is the initial review, feedback, and top selection. This is the fun part where we reach out to the different companies, the different areas, and we ask them for samples of their materials to come in. And it's like Christmas every day, all these packages arriving. We create, again, we're using our initial, our rubric to review them and see where do we stand on each of these packages. We gather then information back from our committee as to what are they seeing. Is this, occasionally you open up a box and you immediately go, no, this isn't what we're getting into. Or you open up something and you're like, oh, maybe we need to look further into this one. We try to narrow it down so that we get to the top selections. It gets a little overwhelming with all of them that come in, and we try to narrow it down to 3. What 3 are we seeing to be the top 3 that we want to see further? And so that's when...
So after clearing a room full of textbook boxes, we then ask our top recommendation publishers to provide a presentation to the selection committee. So this is where they have top publishers or recommendations have the opportunity to sell their product, but most importantly, opportunity for our selection committee to ask questions. So we will have, during this part, we actually have more people in the room because we invite our IT people just to make sure that it aligns or it is compatible with the TPS system. We also invite our the person who's in charge of our technology integration curriculum technology integration department. And then, of course, Ms. Swell is going to be there too during this presentation. Part of this is also where we ask for some quotes from our publishers, and that includes high-end quotes with all the bells and whistles, right? Mid-range quote and low-range quotes.
And then we move to what I love to do as a former classroom teacher is where we pilot the resources. And it's fun to get now input from not only the classroom teachers, what did you see in this? What did you think? Were all the students represented in this? Were all students' needs met in this one? But it's also fun at this particular time now, let's get some feedback from the students. What did the students think of this? Is this something that's going to invite students to learn? We get input from the paraprofessionals who are assisting in every single classroom out there. We get input from parents. Did you see this as homework? What did you think of this? Was this doable? So we get the input from many people after the piloting. And really, this is the fun part of getting in there and digging into it and seeing how does this work? How does that work?
And after a very comprehensive feedback from the selection committee, we then come up with our final recommendation. And so we create our final recommendation and of course present it to our school board for their approval.
We have down there that it's final selection, but we really see it more as a recommendation that we give to the school board. All right, so then the staff training and implementation. This is the fun part now. So now we've selected one, and we've said, we're buying that one right there. And so now it's time to place the order, sitting down with all the players again at the table, and like Sherrielle mentioned a minute ago, making sure we have the right IT people there to meet the needs, or that it meets the needs of 501. This is where we order all the textbooks, all the resource packages that go with it. It's a long list at this time. Now we're going to start, the materials are going to start showing up, and we need to go to the warehouse and help align as to, all right, this is what kindergarten gets, this is what 11th grade gets, this is what each put together the packages and try to get them out to the classrooms before the teachers arrive. We do some some pre-training of the teachers. We try to have that selection made before we go into summer break. And we try to have then some training for the teachers before they go into summer break so they can get an idea of this is what we're going to be doing come next school year. During the summer, there's oftentimes some training that's available as well to go with the new package that's being adopted. And then come August, when we come back to school, There's lots of professional development on how to use this. And we bring in typically professional trainers from the company to train our teachers on what is best practice, what is best use of this. So now it's time for the teachers. So just yesterday, USD 501 started school, and we started with a brand new ELA package. Yesterday, they hit the ground running, trying out their brand new ELA package. And I happened to be with the ELA person yesterday, and she was getting text messages and emails right and left. What about this? What about that? So this is where we step in. We go out and make sure that we're helping with all the training and answering all the questions and putting out all the fires. And then that training continues. It's not just, okay, you're on your own now, good luck, have a great school year. We need to keep that training going. And typically we get training for the rest of that school year and sometimes into the next school year. But we continue training at every single one of our professional developments. And this is where our team, our curriculum and assessment team helps with that continued training in small groups by grade levels and hitting all the questions. And then we monitor the progress. How are we doing? Where do we need to grow? What else do we need in order for this to be successful for one and all? What's that?
Possible training, more training.
Right, and then the possibilities of more training beyond that. So that is pretty much the process in a real quick slideshow presentation there. Questions?
Do we have questions? Kathy?
When you grab a curriculum, to take all of your stuff and say, when you grab a curriculum, is it always for all grades from that one publisher?
Okay, so that's a really great question. Recently, we adopted, it was, I guess, 3 school years ago now, we adopted a math intervention program.
Okay.
And there was very little out there available for pre-K. And so then we got to thinking about this and talking to so many of the publishers, why is there so little for pre-K? And they said, you don't intervene on something you've never taught. Good point. And so we came up with another idea as what fits their needs. But as far as like for the core curriculum, so core math curriculum, we do look at, is this meeting the needs of every single grade level? So you want to go ahead and play off of that to represent the middle school and high school?
Yes, and so Dr. Proctor talked about the importance of coherence earlier, and that is really the main reason why we aim to adopt for like all, say, 6th, 7th, and 8th. High school is a little bit tricky and different because there are some, for example, our AP classes. We have some like AP required textbooks or eligible textbooks that can be used for AP. We've got CEP courses that we base it from the university. So in our part, that would be Washburn University. So we have to use whatever they're using. But usually 6th, 7th, 8th, we aim to have it more coherent by adopting the same like resource from the same publisher. And then for high school, that would be like, for math, for example, that would be Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And then the rest would be based on, like I said, like Washburn, AP, all that.
It's real important for that coherence that whatever is being taught at 2nd grade, that, it leads into what will eventually be taught at 7th grade, and that the same, again, coherence is the big word here, but that it builds upon each other naturally, and that it's not, from one textbook company to another, they might call this something different. So we don't want, at 3rd grade, you're learning to call it this, and then now you go to 4th grade, no, we don't call it that, we call it this. And so we want to make sure there's, it's fluid.
Okay, thank you.
Dina?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's good to see my Topeka friends and to see and hear what you all are doing. More of what you're doing, I should say. Could you address the time frame that these specific steps take? Because it looks like it could just happen within
That's an excellent question.
a short period of time. And
So this
having
typically,
served on one before, I know it takes longer, but if you could address that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
absolutely. I'm sorry, we talked about that too, as to where that belonged in there. So the timeline is typically a full school year of all this planning and prep, and are we choosing the right resource for our students, for our community? So it typically takes an entire school year or very, very close to it. And then basically March, April is when, typically about then is when a presentation is given to our school board as, this is what we recommend, what do you think? And then a selection is typically made about then. So then we spend the summer months putting together all the training and kick off the school year with the new resource. Did you want to add to that? Okay.
And if I might, also, when you have the decision that you're going to look for additional or for another series, how many years do you typically keep a series and then make decisions to make changes?
That's a good question. So we align it with the state standards adoption cycle. And so ideally, it would be, if it's within the 7-year cycle, then we looked at the first year, first 2 years after the new standards have been adopted. So we still consider of what we currently use and just maybe use a better version or an updated version and then look at others as well. So within that standards adoption cycle, a year or two after that.
And then in keeping it, like you said, like you were asking, we would hang on to it. We typically hang on to them a good 5 years and sometimes longer.
Jim. Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Too bad we don't do that across the state. You have more resources in Topeka than, I don't want to name small districts, but you have more people on your committee probably than they have teachers in areas. So I don't want to mislead the board and think this is what's going to happen everywhere. It's great that you do it that way, but if you're in a school with one social studies teacher who does 7-12, okay, and a budget that is like 0, okay, you come in and the textbook has probably got about a 12-year expiration date on it. So we have to figure out a way to help. And a lot of these smaller districts are smart enough to say, well, what are you doing? And that's important. So I hope you share your information with others. Randy, I don't want to sound like we're naysaying our smaller districts, but this is one of the liabilities that they face. And also in transition, having new teachers come in all the time, they start to rely on textbooks. And quite frankly, as a social studies teacher, when I first got there, textbook guided me. It was like 5 years later, I could say the textbook was just a resource. So there's a lot of parts to this that are dictated by size, by budget, by, quality of teachers and quality of people doing it. It's so easy to get sucked in by the publishers because they throw all kinds of wings in. So one of the things that we could help schools with across the state, and maybe we're doing this already through our departments, Randy, is to provide a template for them to, in terms of choosing not just textbooks, but educational support materials. Because the marketplace is just full. And quite frankly, it's like buying a car. It's expensive, and you look at it and it shines, but how's the engine? How's the brakes? How's the efficiency? How safe is it? So there's a lot of things that can happen in the choice. that a lot of, we could provide a great deal of support for our many districts that don't have the resources, not just of recent dollars, but time. You know, if you're the only social studies teacher in a small town, you know, you're blindsided by a lot of things, you know. And so, yeah, just a cautionary tale. You guys are, it's like, you're the shiny car in the neighborhood, and looks really good, and, you know, and then I got to go home and look at my car. So,
We do
you know,
get-
thanks for what you do, but
Oh, thank you.
I don't want to mislead the board and think this is the way it's going to happen everywhere.
Well, in fact, Jim, I think, you know, Ben's been talking about high-quality instructional materials. And I don't know, Ben, this would be appropriate time maybe for you to just talk about what we hope to give for guidance. That would be very similar.
That's great.
We do get emails and whatnot from other school districts asking for our input on, what do you think of this and what do you think of that? So we do.
And I think but I don't want to change my terminology here. It's not just textbooks, it's educational
Resources and
materials in
materials
support of
in
the standards
general.
and the goals that we have. So don't think of it as just one big textbook.
Yes.
You know, no, you don't, but we're older than you.
Right, but we thank you for thinking of, you know, just other districts and smaller districts, because that's very vital, I guess, very vital for like, we talk about access and equity, and so we want to make sure that every district here in Kansas, you know, has that access and to like high quality materials. So thank you so much for thinking of everyone, all the students
Well, I've
in
actually
Kansas.
led
Appreciate it.
textbook
Thank
or,
you.
no, or resource teams to look at it from 1A to 6A,
Yeah, yes.
from Udall to Wichita.
Yeah.
And it's a way different experience.
Yes.
Got to manage a lot of people in it. In fact, it's a little easier when it's just you doing it.
So I really appreciate Mr. McNeese, your thoughts there, and so just want to don't want these ladies to leave, because if you have questions, they can answer them. And you're right, they're fantastic.
And there are more.
Not everybody has people like that, and we hear that a lot. So just very briefly, and we'll spend a lot of time on this moving forward, but we are immediately ready to provide supports. Going back to that theory of action, that school improvement model, anything on there, our belief is we as an agency, in collaboration with systems that do this work extremely well, we want to be able to provide support for each and every one of those items. We must be able to provide that support. So if instructional materials are a high leverage resource for teachers, we need to be able to create frameworks and not only supports for those that have high capacity, but especially those that don't. So that's part of our commitment, and I want to just specifically talk about a few things that we're ready to do now. One is to really develop the type of guidance, tools, resources that Topeka 501 has. That a lot of our smaller districts, but even some larger districts that just haven't invested in this, they may not have that either. So you've heard us talk a lot about TNTP. That's a partner that we're utilizing in this work that has a vast experience there. And we're building I think, a culture of strong collaboration where not only do we have resources that we're developing as a State Department, but we can point people in a direction like Topeka 501 who is doing this work. But we will have specific tools and resources for any system to be able to onboard as they go through this process. I know a lot of people ask, why don't you just put out the list, right? The list of those high quality instructional materials that are aligned. And we can certainly do that and provide that, but you heard how collaborative the process needs to be within a local school district. Mr. McNeese talked about all the variables within a district, the experience of teachers, the demographic of the student and community, and all those things. Not one curriculum is right for every system, even if it does meet some of those characteristics of high quality. So we want to be able to provide that type of resource. We will be able to provide that. Additionally, just the tools to be able to phase that process in, because we know implementation is key. And just because you have something quality If you can't implement it, it probably is a waste of those resources in a lot of ways. And you need to be able to align that, as they talked about, through an entire system. And some tools, some observational tools. So how do instructional leaders that don't have the experience like we have here represented, you may have a building principal that doesn't have a lot of curriculum background. So how do you give them the tools and resources to be able to go into a classroom and find those look-fors to be able to support that teacher who is implementing really challenging, often rigorous curriculum to help each student meet those rigorous standards. One of the specific things too, along with these tools and resources that we're now ready to develop and implement in the short term, one of the things that we want to be able to do, and they spoke to it briefly, as we start to understand those commonly used instructional materials across the state and really build capacity to identify what those high leverage types of resources are that are showing promise in different places, our teams, led by our program managers, our content area specialists, can then start to look at commonalities and almost cohorts of systems that are using the same curriculum and bring them together to talk about gaps, because nothing is going to be perfect. We don't have the Kansas curriculum for math. We have highly aligned curriculum that we can adopt and go through a process, but then there's those gaps, and we can help bring systems together to talk about how are you identifying those gaps, and our teams can provide direct support. We can point them in the direction of others that are further along, and so we just feel like as a starting point to align practice to standards, instructional materials matter. We've shared research on when you don't have quality instructional materials, what are teachers doing? 97% are going to Google, 81% are going to Pinterest, high percentage are going, they're finding resources. Those resources typically are not aligned to standards and typically are not asking students to do grade level work. And so we've got to provide that support. Also, on average, a teacher is spending up to 7 hours, if they don't have these things provided, per week to identify lessons and activities for kids that, again, don't meet those quality standards. That's why this work is so important. So appreciate just the walkthrough. We know that not every system is going to be able to go through all those steps, but certainly that framework can be developed. And we believe we must be able to provide that type of support. So those are things we're ready to do. And we're building those tools. And I think within this year, we'll have that ready for systems that really need that support. So, and with that, we'll continue to answer any questions. And you guys might have to come back up. So.
Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing up, you brought up about 20 years ago or 10 years ago, new students, we got to meet the kids where they are and who's in front of us. So I was thinking about examples of, I'm just even thinking, I'm going to go way back, of my dad. His 8th grade, even 6th grade education was, I would consider, high quality. He was a retainer of that knowledge because nothing was done on technology, so he retained everything. He did everything by reading. He was a strong reader. He had strong geometry, algebraic, and arithmetic abilities. And so to me, though, he had great oral skills and great written skills. He decided to not finish at the time high school, went back and got his GED, but he served for 4 years in the Navy, then came back and did a trade. He was the owner of his barbering business, built the building from scratch. So I'm thinking of, when we talk about high quality instruction materials, I still need to see, because if I look at macro and microeconomics, and I look at what my kids are learning in college now, my dad would have been able to go to college because he had the foundational instructional materials of high arithmetic skills, which is needed in micro and macro. He would know the graphs and charts and things like that. So I'm thinking of examples, like when I'd like to see examples, because I was hoping we would see some, and rather than, you know what I mean, like just see like the differences of what needed to be retained up through 8th grade years ago, and then now what's required to be retained up to just even 10th grade. So those are the kind of things that he would have been able to, my mom went to college, he would have been able to go to college, but he wanted to work for himself and own his own business. And he did that very successfully, did his own taxes, and then had a CPA person look over that at the end of the year. So I'm thinking of what he retained, and then what kids are retaining now, it's different, and you got to say the needs in front of you, but what are we doing as far as setting the standard and the bar high rather than trying to meet everybody where they are? I think we need to set like I think Randy even said that we need to set the bar high and then work with those students that maybe need a little catch up or this and that, but set that bar really, really high. And doing that through instructional materials, doing that maybe not always through technology.
That's right, I agree.
Thank you.
Go ahead, I think you were ready to say something.
No, I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be
I have to ask if it's already okay. What you just shared really reminds me of our Kansas standards guidance document that we are about to, I'm looking at Dr. Factor because so I think each content area is actually developing that, and that we are so excited. We have already, so I am one of the math TLCs, and we've worked so hard, trust me, even up to midnight, that's personal experience, to make sure that that is very, that's aligned and coherent and beneficial for teachers. And that reminds me of here's the bar that we set, but if our students are not there yet, where do we go to help them, and what scaffolds can we do to help them get there? But then at the same time, also, if we have students that are way over here, what can we do to provide enrichment and accelerating opportunities for those kids? So hopefully that progression standards is going to be out soon and will be beneficial and address that particular concern. So sorry if I had to.
That's great. We call that the Standards Alignment Toolkit. So in addition to the framework we're building around instructional materials, that's another support directly connected to that school improvement model, those high leverage actions that our teams are building. And I think it does. It creates that progression. And every system across the state, I think, is going to have a great resource and tool to do work that we've been trying to do for a long time. And that's align what's happening in the classroom to the standards that the state board ultimately adopts.
And I know we've had the opportunity to be over at TCAC, and we probably ought to come back. But that's exactly what you do every day, is you're taking kids from the middle school and early high school, and they're teaching them 2 grade levels above. That's the standard. And then they're trying to do the pedagogy and the resources to get them there, correct? I mean, you're modeling that every single day.
Danny?
Thank you. So we have all this high-quality instructional material, but how does that relate to the performance level of the kids in your school system? And I don't mean to be rude, but looking at longitudinal database, the high school, 67% of the kids are level 1 and 2. So how does the high-quality instructional material relate to better performance?
That's the $1 million question. Go for it.
Thank you. I think that's a good question, but I think personally there are several factors that affect performance, and if we looked at other data as well, and it's a work in progress, it's a working process. That's why we looked at our resource every 7-8 years and see, what's its impact. And one of that is our data. And so we consider that as well, and then see if we need to keep it or find something else that would be more impactful for our kids, and then go from there.
This is where a couple of years ago we realized, we're not showing the progress that we want to see. And so we looked into a math intervention program, and what can we bring in that would maybe be the Band-Aid in between, right? And so we're doing what we can. But we're providing that intervention. We have plenty of excuses, about COVID, but we got to move beyond that and what harm that did to education. We always look at the fact that your first 3 years of buying something, there's that learning curve in there. You buy something new, and is it just what that does to the test scores. And it's typically that third year or fourth year before you see that it's made a change in the testing.
Yeah, research does show like 3 to 5 years impact, but other than that, we also look at most especially growth. And so not necessarily like where's our students at, but where they were and where they are right now. And I think we have noticed a tremendous amount of growth in our students. And then we also looked at other data points like MAP and of course, their grades and other, like online and our core resource data as well.
The state has given IXL, for instance, to the school districts to use. And so in going along with the growth, it was phenomenal to watch some of the kids growing 2-3 school years according to the information on there. So we're seeing the growth, but maybe not the state assessment number changes. But we are seeing some tremendous growth. We really are.
I find it interesting. All of us have heard of a building in Dallas called the Texas School Book Depository. Nobody has ever heard of the Kansas School Book Depository. And that is the reason for that is because what we just heard today in the state capital of Kansas will not happen in Austin by school personnel because the legislature chooses the textbooks. And every seventh grader in a public school in Texas has the same textbook that is chosen by politicians in the Capitol. This is a benefit of a local control state that we have people that are on staff in the trenches making decisions for what's best for them in their school. I appreciate not only the dedication that you have shown, the professionalism that you have shown, but I also appreciate that we have the opportunity to be responsible and make decisions that are responsible. And I'm very interested in everything that we can do to help schools like Jim was talking about, those small schools where you have one person to be sure that they are making the best decisions for their students. Thank you very much. Yes.
I forgot a while ago, I wanted to ask the question, when you have that whole framework going on and you were bringing in, and I love to hear it, the citizen, you had lots of ways that I heard you trying to engage parents, citizens, the whole deal. Does that include, and because they're citizens, it would include, but do you actively on purpose bring in a couple of local board members in that process? Do they?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry, that wasn't mentioned, but yes, indeed.
Well, it might have been and I just missed it, but because I think that is so important because that is part of their role as well, and so it's not just, okay, you recommended it,
Yes.
they need to dig into it too. So thank you, I appreciate that. And for you, Dr. Proctor, when we did the TNTP survey on curriculum, I think because we were so focused, or at least my brain was, on the whole science of reading and that part of it, what did we find on the other course, the ELA and what the science and the math, as far as their alignment?
So we can go through the report. We found the highest degree of alignment in English language arts and literacy. Math was not as strong, science was weaker. So relatively, we kind of moved, from ELA being strong, math a little bit weaker, science being pretty weak. But we can present all those findings and go through the details of that. What we're doing right now, and just to button this up, I know we need to move on. We are starting to look at connections between those systems that are using the same curriculum and outcomes. Mr. Zeck, we'll be coming back to your question, not directly on Topeka, but have some thoughts there, and we'll continue talking about that. So we'll have some more data for the board, but that was kind of stronger ELA, a little weaker math, weaker science, just as a high-level overview.
Thank you again. And Jay. I have not.
Ice cream.
I-
It is National Creamsicle Day.
Oh, close.
You are really close. I'll give you a free creamsicle for that. So thank you for your time this morning. I am here, as we've gone through this year, we've had 1 foot in KISA 2.0, we've had 1 foot in KISA 1.0. This is all KISA 1.0 today. So we are really walking through the last handful of districts to wrap up KISA 1.0. And so I'm going to jump right into it. There are 5 systems for action today. These systems were receive systems in July. These 5 systems were they were conditionally accredited either in 21-22 or 22-23. And then as the board is aware, if a system is conditionally accredited the next year, there is going to be action taken. There's going to be a review of that system, which I think is appropriate. And so what you're acting on today are these 5 systems that were presented to you last month. And the ARC, through what we call a redetermination process, looks at, okay, these systems were conditionally accredited based on these areas. Did they address these areas in what they submitted back to the ARC this year? And so I'll show that these 5 systems, 214 Ulysses, 245 Leroy Gridley, 269 Burton, 347 Kinsley Offerly, and 480 Liberal, the ARC redetermined them to all be fully accredited. They felt like these systems have met the conditions set forth through that conditionally accredited process, and so they are recommending them for fully accredited to the board.
Betty.
Are you ready for a motion?
Sure.
Okay. I move that the Kansas State Board of Education approve the recommendations of the Accreditation Review Council as presented here today.
Is there a second to that motion? Jim seconds that motion. Are there questions? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Appears to be unanimous. And now we have some new
Yes,
things.
so these are the last 9 systems for KISA 1.0 for redetermination. So they are received this month. They will be scheduled for action next month. These 9 systems, all 9 were actually conditionally accredited 22-23. And so they, through the redetermination process, they've submitted their responses to those areas for improvement, what we call AFIs. And so I will share with you these 9 systems. You'll see that they are a mix of recommendations from the state board, either from the ARC being fully accredited or conditionally accredited. So there are 2 systems you see there, Southern Cloud and Otis Bison, that the ARC feels like they need to remain in conditionally accredited status. We have spoken with those systems. I think they feel like they know what the ARC was saying. They recognize where they are, and they have a good plan to move forward to meet those conditions. Something that we've done differently for next year is that if the board approves this, then Southern Cloud and Otis Bison would then be up for redetermination next June. So June of 2025, we would give them the year to respond to that, and then the ARC would then again meet in June of next year, vote, and then these would come before the state board as receive items in June. So we want to just kind of have that lined out on the front end. So those systems, and then these final 3, all being recommended for full accreditation to the state board by the ARC.
Are there questions? All that information was in the packet, so we should add
Yes.
that. If not, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Doug.
I promised Doug you'd be in a good mood when I was done, so.
Is that the first time you lied to him?
So, thank you, members of the board, for having us here today. What I have for you today, hopefully is the last time that we will be presenting ESSER plans to you all for approval. This month, we have 19 different districts that have submitted change requests or they are finishing up the use of their ESSER funds. Of those 19, 13 of those had items that came in under budget, which allowed them to purchase new items or add new items to their plans. And then the rest of those, the other 6 then are cleaning up the rest of their allocations. And so we've got anything with any district with a 0 next to it are the ones that things came in under budget, so there's no net change. The total net change for these 19 districts is $8.5 million, and you'll, as you read in it, most of that is in Kansas City. So just a few dollars for the rest of everybody else, but Ulysses used some money for Chromebooks, Northeast some programs, Barber put some towards premium pay, Wichita for salaries and hardware. Holton used up the rest of theirs for some PD and some curriculum. Jeff North and Jeff West both freed up a little money to purchase some curriculum. Marysville added some money to an HVAC project that had already been approved. Then Ellis put a little bit more money towards retention pay, and you'll notice that these are small dollar amounts. We did have districts with as little as $1 left to figure out what they needed to do with, but we have all of that cleaned up now, and so we're down to 0 for everybody. Augusta for some retention pay. Riverton had quite a bit there for curriculum, and then Hoxie moved some money to curriculum and salaries. South Brown, some more cleaning supplies. Remember that these funds can help you come out of the pandemic in better shape than you went in, so they can still pay for a little bit extra cleaning. Dodge put some money towards premium pay for their special ed staff that hadn't gotten any premium pay prior, so they allowed that for their co-op teachers. Independence for curriculum, Stanton County curriculum. Rural Vista put a little bit of money towards a smart board. What they had left didn't pay for a full smart board, but they used some of that ESSER funding to pay for part of it. Fort Larned premium pay, and then the big one is KCK. All the supporting documentation for their HVAC project, about half of that goes to HVAC, and then the other half went to salaries, and those salaries are for nurses in each of their buildings for 2 years, for the previous 2 years. So they've paid nurses out of that. And so it's 48 buildings, I believe, that each had a nurse for the last 2 years that was paid for out of ESSER. And so you see that the net change is $8.5 million. We use all of that up, or if you approve that, that zeroes out the ESSER account. All funds are accounted for. And as we look at the different categories of how the money is proposed to be spent, we're still sitting at 75% for those gold bars, 25% for the blue, which is the HVAC projects mainly. So the teaching and learning piece, we came in at 75%, and I think for ESSER 2 we were around 80%. So I think the money is intended to go towards good purposes.
Thank you. Dina?
Well, I was ready to make a motion if you're
Go right
ready
ahead.
for one. I move that the Kansas State Board of Education accept the recommendations of the Commissioners' Task Force on ESSER distribution of money and approve the public school district for ESSER 3 change requests as presented for use of federal COVID-19 relief funds.
Is there a second? Jim seconds the motion. Any further discussion? If not, Melanie.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I clicked the button fast enough. I just want to thank everyone who has served on the task force that managed this process. I am thankful that the board did not have to be in the weeds. And back to your comment about the books, Jim, I think that local control here is really important because only these districts know what they truly need. And so while I haven't necessarily agreed with every single line item that I have seen over the years, I just really appreciate the process, and I'm really proud of Kansas for the way that we handled this when I look at what some other states have done. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everyone who served on the task force and who has done the heavy lifting on this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. With the committee, the task force is going to meet one more time. At the request of one of the members, they thought we've done all this work. We want to see whether or not it worked. So after all the reports are in, which won't be until late December or sometime early January, we're going to meet one more time, not to make any decisions, but to get a report on the results. And then if the board is interested, we can bring that report back here at that time. Danny.
Thank you, Jim. So at the end of this, and we do your report and everything, is the federal government going to come in and audit how we spend our money?
They're already here. They've already started that process in.
So if they don't like the way we've spent it, does that mean they're going to charge us back that money?
Yeah, the school will have to pay
And
the
so,
money.
so the school system, each public school system would have to pay what, if it's 82 million in KCK, then they want it all back to them, then KCK taxpayers have to pay the 82 million. Would that be?
That's unlikely to happen because
yes,
of the extra processes that we made. But yes, the school district, we do not have any liability. We did our job. And the only way that would happen is if a school X spent money differently from what they told us. Right. And if that's canned by the audit, then they would have to pay it back to them.
So is the federal,
Is that correct, Doug?
Yeah.
so is the federal government going to audit each school system?
No. They'll pick and choose, just like they do everything else.
And that will be the next phase of our team as we move from approving plans to monitoring the implementation of those plans. And so hopefully if anything's not quite right, we'll catch it before the feds come in and catch it.
Vote.
Yes.
Oh, I said, well, did we
Yeah.
vote?
All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Abstain? 802. Thank you.
Just a reminder that the two gentlemen that you see here and most of our staff, with the exception of now two, I believe, they had full-time jobs before the pandemic, and this was added on. We did add some staff during this time to do a lot of the legwork, but this is a lot of work on a lot of people's part that already had jobs, so thank you for all the work.
Yeah, absolutely confident that they did us a tremendous favor. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We will return at 11:20. Eric, I can't see Ann or Melanie. Are they on? Motion would be in order to approve the consent agenda, which would be the non-pulled items, which would be A, C, and G. Motion to approve those items. Betty? Michelle? All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Abstain? 901. Dr. King is here to discuss E. So Dr. King, if you'll come forward and tell us what we need to know.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, members of the board. I appreciate being here. Always happy to come talk about computer science, specifically E. Item E is related to the legislature has authorized, or has given us, I guess, I forget the exact, I'm blanking on the exact word. I'm sorry? If they've allowed us $1 million for PD, for computer science, to bring teachers up to speed, existing in-service teachers up to speed, to teach computer science in order to meet the PACAC's requirement that every high school in Kansas offer a computer science course this year. So I would be happy to answer any questions related to that particular grant. We had 4 applications, and the committee met. The committee's decision was to award all 4 of the grantees with most of what they had asked for. We ran up against the total amount of the allotment. But all 4 of these have worked with the grant before. They've all done good work. I apologize that I don't have any details, any data for the year that just completed, because that data just came in. I've been going through. I need to make some calls to districts and make sure that I really do understand what's going on before I try and report to you. Plus the final reports from the grantees from the previous year are due August 31st. So I'm looking forward to those. I'm really looking forward to presenting with you the great stuff that we're doing. I don't have the specifics available yet.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Porter. Thank you for allowing me a chance to comment on this. I spoke with Dr. King here, and we had some good conversations during the break. I was against this bill with its inception of it at the very beginning. So it was overwhelmingly passed by the legislature. I'll just remind everybody in 2022, it's the basis for the item E, which is on today's consent agenda. The bill in the legislature requires all secondary schools to offer or have a plan to eventually offer a computer science course. Also, the legislature will make appropriations for teacher development grants to be awarded by the State Board of Education. Once again, the legislature continues to expand technology into the schools, as well as the legislature continues to find ways to force its education agendas upon the state. Another note regarding sub HB 2466, the bill included a provision to diminish parents' rights. The legislature chose to exempt national assessment providers to administer a college and career readiness assessment questionnaire or survey without parent permission. It did this by excluding the national assessment providers from the definition of operator in the state of statutes for SOPPA, which is Student Online Personal Protection Act. If you want to understand a little about what this is, exemption means, look at the definition of the personally identifiable information in KSA 726332 and what an operator may or may not do as provided in KSA 72633. So I will be pulling this and voting against it, as I was against this bill from the get-go. I feel like $1 million could be spent in other ways. And with the new Blue Ribbon Task Force that we're starting soon with screen time, I feel like this is maybe not the need to expand technology in our classrooms K through 12. Thank you.
Ann,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And really, this isn't expanding technology, it's expanding computer science curriculum. But I get the issue, and they should, give us, hold on, let us manage this and give us the money when we need it, which they tend not to do. But Dr. King, I was curious, and you may not have the data now, but as long as we have to do this, we ought to do it well. And I'm wanting to make sure the money is well spent. And if you have any data on which provider's giving us the best bang for the buck, I would welcome that when you get it analyzed.
Yes, ma'am. The best bang for the buck is a little difficult to define because of the nature of, I mean, you're training teachers who will hopefully go on to teach students and do great work. The fun thing, I think, to me about the mix of grantees that we've had in the past, and we have again this year, is the mix of different modes of training that we do for the teachers. Everything from short boot camp sort of operations, where one, in fact, is Orion is an online provider. So it's very accessible for the teachers. It's kind of quick for the teachers. It's good information, and it really helps a teacher who's already technically leaning to get into this field. Whereas a program like K-State's, and K-State is arguably the most expensive per teacher option, but on the flip side, that provides teachers with actually a graduate level minor, academic minor in computer science. And so that gives teachers a significant foundation in the field, the ability to go out and teach students with a lot of credibility, a lot of sense that they know the topic. And it also gives them the opportunity to, in most places, to actually generate college credit with the high school classes that they're teaching. And so again, there's a range of cost per teacher, because there's a range of approaches, and it will be very interesting to look and see how we do end up defining best bang for the buck, so to speak.
Well, we think you're in the best position to do that. And I really want to support what Michelle said in terms of pushing back on the legislature on them trying to tell every district what they want. But on the other hand, we did vote, and I don't think I voted for it, but this board did vote to allow districts to use computer science as a substitute for math and or a science credit. So we ought to make sure that we have enough teachers out there in all the districts who are well trained who could do that. So we're kind of, in between here. We have our own goals on helping every school provide computer science and that kind of thing. And then we have the legislature too. So somehow we have to work together with them, push back where we need to, and then use the resources that they give us as best we can, I think. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. King. I really appreciate you being here and the information that you have provided me. And so I would ask that we could get a report when you do have all of the information comparing, because this just started in the, 22-23 school year, this requirement for the
23-24 school year was the initial requirement, so last year.
Okay.
The year that just finished.
So yeah, just being able to see, and I really appreciate Board Michelle bringing out that, because that's the part that I read that was just really startling to me, was the lack of protection that was stuffed into which obviously is not your fault, and I'm not pointing fingers, but did just want to have a little more information and kind of put out there, since this is a newer legislation, what is going on and what is happening with the $1 million that they're putting into it. So appreciate you coming, appreciate the information. Really look forward to hearing the differences of what we're seeing as the money's being used in the teachers. You did give me some information because you had to do a survey of what districts already were giving a computer science class. So what you gave me was that there was 103 districts that had a computer science course?
That is from the last year's report,
Right.
Which was the year prior to the Act's requirement kicking in. Yes, ma'am.
Right. that was our starting point.
Yes.
Right. So just looking to see, but as we spoke during the break, I mean, what you were saying was schools being forced to offer a course that nobody's taking. So that's a frustration because districts know what they need. They know what the kids are doing. So, and would you mind just sharing with what you shared with me with Michelle on the grade level thing you were talking about?
My greatest concern with the PAC Act is its focus on secondary, and that's actually a concern I have with the national effort too. I've had long discussions with Code.org, which is the organization that has rallied basically for legislation such as this. The problem is that the data shows that kids who are in their K through 5, K through 6 age range are the ones that's when they decide whether they're going to be techies or, and a lot of times it's not specific to the field they're going into, but just this general sense of I can't do tech or I can do tech. And so expecting students to suddenly decide they want a computer science course in high school is effective, but not as effective as I would like it to be. This has been shown in the data from the states that jumped early on, such as Arkansas, where they were offering a course in every single high school, but oftentimes that classroom only had 2 or 3 students in it. Because the kids they weren't ready for it. The parents didn't have the idea that they needed it. And so in order to build that foundation, you really need to be focusing on computer science in K through 5. That needs to be integrated with more of the topics that we do. And unfortunately, this bill doesn't provide the resources for that. And by focusing, it also doesn't provide any resources for administration of the grants or anything else. And so by focusing the attention on that, it handcuffs me to a great extent in terms of my ability to work with K through 5, which is where I would much prefer to work.
Interesting. Well, thank you for the information. I really appreciate it.
Betty?
Okay, let me ask a question then. This is a grant or an award that the districts would apply for, is that?
The districts can apply for. In fact, our first year, Olathe District did win part of the grant, and they used the grant appropriately, and they closed the grant out appropriately. This year, we didn't have any districts applying for it. It was other agencies. Well, universities and other agencies.
Okay, so I guess where I'm trying to go with this is set aside specifically for this purpose, and if districts or agencies have a use for it, then they can make the application. It's not required that we do anything other than acknowledge that this award is available right now.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry.
Okay. This is a grant or an award that's being set aside specifically for applicants.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. With that being said, I don't know if you're ready.
These 3 that are pulled, D, E, and F, have different meanings for different people. We're going to vote on them each separately. So since we're discussing E, a motion would be in order to approve consent agenda item E.
Okay, and I'm prepared to make that motion.
Right ahead.
Okay, I move that the State Board of Education approve the item number E as we've discussed.
Is there a second? Jim seconds that motion. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All oppose? Abstain? Was that 7-1? Thank you. Motion would be in order to approve item D. I'll make the motion. Go ahead, Betty. Ann?
Go ahead and make the motion. I just had a comment.
Okay.
And actually, I had a comment prior to, if I may.
You may.
Okay. And this is something that I strongly believe in and support. And I had a situation that I will share that one of my districts brought to my attention of a young lady who's just her and her mother passed, and she lived in the car, but she came to school every day. She got ill, and it was because of McKinney-Vento that they were able to get this young student the medical care and the attention that she needs. This is something that if you have a heart, how can you deny homeless students an opportunity? Now, there are a lot of people that don't know what it is to struggle financially or economically. And maybe that's part of what the problem is. But because I feel strongly enough about this, I move that the State Board of Education move to approve item D on consent agenda.
Is there a second to that motion? Jim? Further discussion? Now, Ann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, last year, I think this McKinney-Vento vote was the vote heard around the state. That was the year that we barely passed this money that provides the extra support for homeless kids and families in 14 different communities. I can't think of a single other vote we made all year that brought so much alarm from superintendents, teachers, and parents. The state board almost threw homeless kids under the bus, literally. It is not our job to fix the homeless problem. The state is working on more affordable housing, as are many, many communities. I know Lawrence has just addressed that in a big way, and Topeka's getting ready too. It is the job of the state and those communities to fix that problem. Our job is to make sure that we remove the barriers that exist so that homeless kids can continue their education. This includes transportation, testing services, wraparound services for the families, and much, much more, as Betty described. We can help with these funds to provide all of that. We can provide a level of stability in at least this one area of these kids' lives. We can make a difference. In fact, we are obligated by law, and I think by human decency, to do so. These kids are not second-class citizens. And I want to tell my homeless students in Olathe, Ottawa, and Topeka that I represent that I get it. That you need more than my high five and my smile at the door, that you need my vote, and today you're going to get it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kathy?
Thank you, sir. Dr. Watson, I have dug into this, and I'm going to have to bring it up again because of what Betty has said. My understanding is, and I think we were mutually on the same page, that this bill does, or this money does not actually provide medical services. So I'm very confused with what Betty has put forth.
That is correct. It does not provide dental or medical services. Maureen is here. It would provide where the resources to get those services are in a community.
Giving the information.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Dennis.
Well, I just wanted to say I have a lot of compassion for a child that is, caught in this situation. I guess I just have a technical question. How do we verify? How do we know? And what qualifies someone as homeless?
I don't want to yell into that. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Under the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless, what qualifies a student as eligible for McKinney-Vento services is lacking irregular, fixed, or adequate nighttime residence. And there has to be a loss of housing due to a hardship in order for that trigger to happen. And so how do we identify them? Usually on enrollment is where we catch. There are screener questions on enrollment. Where are you sleeping at night? That kind of thing.
Okay. So the address and a zip code is not available.
Oh, they need an address and a zip code, especially if they're looking for transportation services, because we would need to know where to go to pick them up. But in general, if they're not needing transportation services, if you're staying in your car, you're not necessarily going to have an address or a zip code. It could be, I'm staying in whatever park I can stay in at night. So that does happen, yes.
So it really is determined at the local level.
Yes.
Someone that knows the situation.
Yes.
And they report, and if the situation changes, then that is locally controlled, and the
It
child
is.
has found a safe place.
It is.
Okay.
So the way it works, the McKinney-Vento eligibility determination sticks for the entire school year. At the beginning of the next school year, so we're getting questions right now, or I'm getting questions. Families that were identified, students that were identified last year, now we're going back and we're verifying where they are. Are you okay? Do you have a place to live? So the eligibility has to be reevaluated on an annual basis.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Melanie?
Thank you, Vice Chair Porter. I just want to be really clear that this group of students that we're talking about, homeless children, this is a group that systemically has their rights violated, often by just the people around them that they see every day. The bullying that they experience, the stigma of being homeless is brutal. And so I pulled a quote that I wanted to read. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Act provides rights and services to children and youth experiencing homelessness, which includes those who are sharing the housing of others due to a loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason, staying in motels, trailer parks, campgrounds due to lack of adequate alternative, staying in shelters, transitional housing, or sleeping in cars, parks, abandoned buildings. You get the idea. This is a federal law. We need to pay very close attention to what we're doing here. And I just want to emphasize that the funds that we're looking at here today support our schools and supporting this vulnerable population. So please keep that in mind as you're considering your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? We do, don't we? Okay. Okay. In that
I
case-
might need to
Go ahead.
interject for just a second. I wanted to address Member Hopkins' questions about medical. Can you maybe explain to me what it is you were specifically asking? Because we can use sub-grant funds to do things like physicals for sports, eyeglasses, things that would benefit, that would be barriers for kids to participate in education, hearing aids, eyeglasses, that kind of thing. Is that what you were asking?
So when you say sub-grants, what does that mean? Because when I looked it up, and then when I talked to Dr. Watson, we weren't finding any medical beyond getting records and giving the information, having that referral ability with whatever cost that was to the district to do. So I did not find what you're talking about.
Okay, so what we're looking at here today are the sub-grant funds going to allocate it out to districts that went through the grant approval process. Of the 16 allowable costs on that sub-grant list are things like getting immunization records or going to the eye doctor for an eye check if the family can't afford it, that kind of thing. We can pay for those kinds of very limited medical necessities for kids to continue in education if families can't afford it. Okay. I wanted to make sure that we were clear on that. Yep.
All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion, 9-1, motion carries. And I make the motion to approve item F on the consent agenda. Is there a second? Betty seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All opposed? 9-1. Thank you very much. We have completed the consent agenda. I have something for the chair report that'll be very brief, and I'm going to ask Melanie if she has anything to add. Last month, if you'll recall, we had the discussion on ESI, and I talked about the possibility of bringing together another group to do some updating. And I left it at that. So I haven't done anything because I didn't feel like I had permission. Unless you tell me otherwise, unless this board tells me otherwise now, I'm going to proceed. Okay, Melanie, do you have anything to add as the chair report?
Looking at your screen, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm having a hard time hearing here this morning for some reason. I will just mention briefly that I had a meeting along with Commissioner Watson and a student last week who was interested in talking about establishing, she wanted to talk about student voice in the state board, which of course we have a student voice committee, but she was specifically interested in how students can give direct input to activities and actions of the board. We've talked before about how some states actually have a student member on their board. Sometimes those students are elected, sometimes they're appointed, varies from state to state. And so we've started conversation around how we might establish a student council to empower students in Kansas to be able to voice their opinions to the state board. And so we're in the beginning, I think, of that process. And Commissioner Watson, feel free to jump in. But we've started the conversation, and so hoping to be able to bring something to the board in the coming months, along with the support of these students who are asking for it. Commissioner, do you want to add anything?
One of the things that you cannot do easily is add someone to the state board because it's in the Constitution of Kansas. So it would take a constitutional amendment change. And that would include even a non-voting member. So we talked to her about that. We just talked to her about options. I think she had actually, her initial complaint was with the local boards, some things that she didn't feel like she had a voice even at the local board. But she's willing to kind of organize, is there a group? So we're going to work with Keisha. Keisha's already got some groups, we don't want to step on them. But is there a way that, with liaisons with the student voice, that maybe we can meet with a group of students from across Kansas and get their input on things that they feel are affecting their lives. So it was really kind of a general conversation. I appreciate her reaching out to us, Melanie, and starting the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, obviously board members we hear from constituents, we hear from students, parents, both in and outside of, I know I get emails from outside of my district, and we don't report on all of those, but I just think that this is timely as we're starting the school year. Kids are starting to think about what clubs they might want to be in and where they want to be engaged. And so I think that this is a good conversation to be having right now. And I look forward to being able to bring something back to the board soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark.
Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on the item that was moved from the consent agenda and update publicly the board on the ongoing negotiations. We do hope that we will be able to present a one-year contract or negotiated agreement extension, as well as a memorandum of understanding. And that memorandum of understanding is essentially a bridge between what occurred this year in negotiations and what would kind of pick up where we left off for the next year's negotiations. One of the things that it's caused more, spinning our wheels a little bit on the negotiation is that we've got new representatives from the KNEA that we have to get up to speed on the unique ness of the school for the deaf, both in terms of its funding, its ability to make financial decisions that aren't already in the budget process, and the uniqueness as it relates to the statutory requirement that the salary schedule of the current year follow the previous year for Olathe schools. So
we lost you, Mark.
I think you hit something, don't you think? Just by the way he looks. This cord. Plug into.
While we're waiting for Mark to come on, is there any addition to travel? If there is, just email it to Deborah, and we'll get it taken care of. A motion would be in order to approve travel. Betty and Kathy. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries unanimously. Until we're waiting for Mark, are there committee reports? Okay, Dennis?
I just want to report that the NASB conference was, I was glad I was there, and good information. There was some interesting simulations, one on legislative and board interaction. I thought was helpful, and how to communicate with each other. And then also they had a parliamentary simulation, which was really kind of at the end and really more entertainment than anything else. So, but there is, some good publications that come out of them. They have a good journalism department there, and I left a handout that they gave to us there for each one of you. And then also, I just want to report on the Ag in the Classroom we had a quarterly meeting, and there's some things coming up. We're actually, thanks to Deborah, she got right on this, inviting them to come present. So we'll hear from them this fall, I hope. And also their initiation of getting education packets out to new teachers about what they can do in the classroom. They delivered 935 kits, and they have 800 plus new subscribers on their website. So, and also there'll be, there's a little mini farm, whatever, that they staff at the state fair, and that's coming up. So maybe I'll do a 4-hour shift there. So I'm always encouraged by what they're doing. And then also a Zoom meeting with the opioid and prescription drug people. Just, we've talked about Narcan and how we can help districts be ready for problems. And this conversation's going throughout the state through many agencies. I think there's over a dozen agencies that were represented, and everybody's kind of on the same page. So we're doing the right thing by being alert to it. So I want to just thank you for having that as part of our agenda.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on what Melanie talked about with student voice. And I will remind students out there that they can reach out to the board, which we do get emails from them. They can come and speak before us. They have 3 minutes, just like the rest of the Open Citizens Forum. They can come and speak before the board. So maybe that's something that we need to open up to, as far as not just parents coming and agencies and different people coming to speak for us at 10:30 on those Tuesday mornings, but one time a month. They know our schedule well in advance if they're allowed to leave their school and come and speak before us. I do know that a lot of students do speak before their local boards. I've seen a lot of that. I would say that rather than trying to change the Constitution or make an amendment to that, they have other ways that they can reach out to the state board and influence us or give us some good ideas. I just want to say that, put that out there, because there's a lot of parents that would like to take off from work or come and speak before us, and they don't always have that opportunity, and they know well in advance when our meetings are as well. So, but they do speak at their local board, and I think that that's something that I think is very important, and they do that, and those are usually in the evenings. Ours are a little bit more hard to come by because they're in the middle of the day. That's why a lot of parents, which I would love to hear from those parents, can't come in the middle of the day and speak before us for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Betty?
If I may add on, too, because one of the things that I did in Wichita, there's a student council where they have representatives from every school that meet. So I've already asked to be on the agenda. One of the things with the student voice, and I think we went to Emporia when Ann chaired that committee. I think she had us going in so many different directions. But what I will point out, I know you chair that committee, but they seem more comfortable when they're in their environment. So I want to add on that, you know, we're still not opposed to going out if there's a group of them that want to talk with us, because they ask some good questions, and I think being in their environment does help. So yeah, it's good if they can come, but I will still be available to go and visit as well, Michelle, if that's still on the agenda. So just wanted to add that on.
I'll just add on that I really like the idea of a student group that meets regularly to advise us. That doesn't mean that they can't do all these other things, but I think that'd be a really good thing because the people that know what's going on in the school better than us and better than anybody else are the students that are there. And we need to listen to them. Any other? Okay, that was any other committee reports? Future agenda items? Kathy?
Thank you, sir. I would like, for a matter of discussion, to find out what are all the reports that the state board is required to give to the legislature that I know the staff is fulfilling for us, but what is that? What does that encompass? What is all of that? And how, going forward, we would want to handle that? Because at present, from my understanding, we don't see those. And I would just like to have an open conversation about that and know exactly how many we're talking about, what are we talking about, and then how we're handling that. And the second one would be, I'd like to know what all of the required trainings are that schools are having to go through by law, and like when they were enacted and what, you know, because I do know that those things just keep getting added on and added on and added on, and I'd like to have a comprehensive list of what exactly that is, and then maybe what can we do to manage that in some way.
As a former school administrator, I would certainly like to know how to deal with that.
Yeah, I'd like to look at that. Thank you.
Betty?
I did have the opportunity to attend Kansas Future Teachers and Emporia, and I think, I know Ann was there as well. That is so great, and I would like if we could have a presentation from them, particularly because we are concerned about future teachers, and I just want to share just real quickly on that. I had the opportunity to talk to one of the students here, and he was saying, I had no idea I wanted to be a teacher, and I was just encouraged to come to this camp. He goes, it's like the lights came on, and he was really excited, and I just love the work that they're doing, so I would love if we could get a presentation from them. The Paola was here, this is my second one, and talking about STEM, and I was telling him how pleased I was to see the young ladies participating in that. And she said, we encourage this. So they have looked at ways of encouraging our female students to become engaged in STEM. So at some point to have a presentation on how that's going, what they're doing, because they're really excited about that. The third one is family engagement, and every Student Succeed Act has family engagement as one of the pillars. My specific ask from them is, how are we meeting this in Kansas? How well are districts engaging families? Are families aware that this is a critical component to Every Child Succeed Act? And so a presentation on that would be great. And my fourth and final request, USD 259 Wichita is our largest school district, 85 buildings in that school. 112 different spoken languages in that district. And we had, before COVID, had the opportunity to go and visit buildings, and we haven't had a chance to do that. I would love if we then could bring 259 here to share some of those things that we don't see in just every district, language that big, how they handle it, just to share what they're doing in 259. I think that if they are available, that would be really great. Those are my 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you. I would like to make sure that next month we get Susan Dunaway on the agenda to speak to the whole board about screen time and cell phones, how it affects them educationally, behavior, and mentally. Since we're doing the task force, I would like the whole board to hear from them, so you're thinking about all this stuff also, because your input is real important to that. And then I just happened to talk to Jake Steele also, and I want to make sure that we communicate clear down so that the local board members have the opportunity to listen to the Zoom meetings also. Because the more because a lot of boards do have cell phone policies, but they're looking at it again since we brought all this up. And so I would like to make sure that we've communicated with the local boards somehow, that if they want to listen to these things, they can. Because I think that's important.
And Danny, that will be one of our major topics this the next Thursday we meet on the Zoom. And that will be live streamed and recorded. So you don't even have to join it live. You could go back and watch it if you at a different time for anyone. But we will make sure that all of our listservs, if you would, superintendents, teachers, principals, are notified of that, school boards included.
And then one other thing, the Citizens Open Forum where the board member brought that about the curriculum of Second Step and stuff, I would like to see our team research and have a presentation to the board here about the concerns that she brought up.
Thank you very much. We look forward to everybody being back here next month. I will be very happy to move back down the table because I discovered something that I'd forgotten. If you're here, you've got to pay attention all the time. That being said, thank you for being here. We appreciate the work the board does, and we are adjourned.